All I wanted was my assigned seat, 1A. I never imagined it would lead to me canceling an international flight and provoking a corporate titan. The exhaustion was a physical weight, pressing down on my shoulders as I shuffled down the jet bridge. It had been a brutal week of negotiations in Tokyo 13-hour days, fueled by lukewarm coffee and the adrenaline of closing a 9-figure deal. All I wanted was my seat, 1A, a glass of something cold, and 12 hours of blessed, uninterrupted silence on the way back to LA. I'm a simple man in that respect. The jet is just a tool, a way to get from A to B. The fact that it's my jet, part of an airline I acquired 2 years ago, is a detail I prefer to keep to myself. I fly commercial on my own fleet because it's the only way to get an honest assessment of the customer experience. I stepped into the first-class cabin, the scent of leather and recycled air a familiar welcome. And that's when I saw her. A woman, probably in her late 50s, was settled comfortably in my seat. She was decked out in what I call new money camouflage. A blindingly white pantsuit, oversized Chanel sunglasses perched on her head like a tiara, and a handbag that probably had its own mortgage sitting on the empty seat beside her. She was furiously typing on her phone, her thumb jabbing at the screen with an aggressive rhythm. I paused, checking my boarding pass again just to be sure. Yep, seat 1A, clear as day. "Excuse me," I said, my voice calm and polite. Years of boardroom battles have taught me that the quietest person in the room often holds the most power. I believe you're in my seat. She didn't even bother to look up from her phone. She just flicked her eyes over me, a dismissive up-and-down glance that took less than a second, but conveyed a lifetime of judgment. My travel attire was comfortable, a simple black hoodie, tailored joggers, and a pair of clean sneakers. It's my standard flying uniform. Apparently, it didn't meet her standards for a first-class passenger. "I don't think so," she said, her voice dripping with condescension. "I'm in 1A. "Right," I replied, holding out my boarding pass. "So am I. This is my seat." She finally lowered her phone, a deep put-upon sigh escaping her lips as if I were the world's greatest inconvenience. She squinted at my pass. "Well, there must be a mistake. I was here first. I prefer the window." "I can appreciate that," I said, my patience already wearing thin. "But the seat assigned to you is 1C on the aisle. I'd be happy to help you with your bag." "I'm not moving," she stated flatly, turning back to her phone as if the conversation was over. This was a new one. I've dealt with quiet seat stealers, apologetic ones, and confused ones. But the blatant, unapologetic refusal was a bold move. I caught the eye of a flight attendant, a young man named Ben, according to his name tag, who was hurrying down the aisle. "Is there a problem, sir?" he asked, his smile a little strained. "Yes, Ben. It seems this passenger is in my seat and is refusing to move." Ben's professional smile tightened. He turned to the woman. "Ma'am, can I see your boarding pass, please?" She huffed, rolling her eyes as she fumbled in her oversized bag. She produced the pass and thrust it at him. Ben looked at it, then at mine. "Ma'am, your assigned seat is 1C. This gentleman is in 1A. You'll need to move to your correct seat." The woman snatched her ticket back. "This is ridiculous. I'm a Platinum Medallion member. I've flown 1,000,000 miles with this airline. I always get the seat I want. Can't you just put him somewhere else?" She gestured vaguely in my direction with a flick of her wrist. "Put him in the back of first class. It's all the same." My jaw tightened. The implication hung thick and heavy in the air. Him. She didn't just see a fellow passenger. She saw someone who, in her mind, didn't belong. Someone who should be grateful to even be in the cabin. Ben, to his credit, stood firm. "I'm sorry, ma'am, but I can't do that. The flight is completely full. This is the seat he paid for. I need you to move to 1C now so we can finish boarding and depart on time." That's when she decided to detonate. Her voice rose, sharp and shrill, turning heads across the cabin. "Are you serious? You're going to inconvenience me for him? Do you have any idea who I am? My husband is a very important man. I will have your job for this. Check his ticket again. Are you sure you read it right? Maybe his ticket is for a different flight, or a different class." The entire cabin was silent now, all eyes on the three of us. The humiliation was a hot flash on my neck. It wasn't about the seat anymore. It was about the principle. It was about the casual, venomous racism masquerading as entitlement. I held up a hand, stopping Ben before he could reply. I looked directly at the woman, my voice dropping to a low, steady tone that cut through the tension. You have exactly 60 seconds to move to your assigned seat. If you are not in seat 1C when 60 seconds is up, I promise you, you will regret it. She laughed. A short, ugly, barking sound. Is that a threat? Are you threatening me? I'm calling security. She never got the chance. I didn't break eye contact. I slowly pulled my phone from my pocket, my movements deliberate. I found the number I was looking for in my contacts and pressed call. It rang once. A voice answered immediately. Mr. Vance, is everything all right? It was David, my chief of operations. I kept my eyes locked on the woman's smug face. Her smile was one of pure triumph, as if she'd already won. David, I said, my voice devoid of all emotion. Cancel it. Sir? Flight 3B7, Tokyo to LAX. Shut it down. Right now. There was no hesitation. Consider it done, sir. I ended the call and slipped the phone back into my pocket. The woman was still smirking at me, waiting for me to be hauled away in defeat. Then a quiet click echoed through the cabin, and the captain's voice crackled over the intercom, shaky and confused. Ladies and gentlemen, this is your captain speaking. I've just been informed by air traffic control and our corporate headquarters that, for reasons I cannot explain, Flight 3B7 has been cancelled. The captain's words hung in the air like a death sentence for 1,000 holiday plans and business meetings. A collective staggered gasp rippled through the cabin, followed by an immediate wave of angry murmurs. Phones were whipped out. People started unbuckling their seatbelts. The carefully controlled environment of a 777 preparing for takeoff instantly devolved into chaos. Through it all, I remained perfectly still, my eyes fixed on the woman in my seat. The smirk on her face didn't so much fall as it shattered, replaced by a slack-jawed confusion. Her gaze darted from the intercom speaker to me, then back again. A flicker of understanding, or perhaps just fear, crossed her features. She still didn't get it, not really, but she knew, on some primal level, that the lightning bolt that had just struck the plane had been thrown by the man in the black hoodie, standing calmly in the aisle. What? What does that mean? She stammered, her voice a reedy whisper. Cancelled? They can't just cancel the flight. Ben, the flight attendant, looked just as bewildered. He was speaking frantically into the cabin phone, his face pale. Other crew members were moving down the aisles, trying to placate the rising tide of passenger frustration. This is your fault, the woman hissed at me, her voice regaining some of its venomous strength. She was pointing a perfectly manicured, trembling finger. You made a scene. You threatened me. They're probably kicking you off the plane, and now we all have to suffer. A few nearby passengers turned to glare at me, their faces masks of indignation. They were looking for a target for their anger, and the woman had just handed me to them on a silver platter. I didn't flinch. I let them stare. I let her accuse. I was the calm eye of the hurricane I had created. Just then the cabin door hissed open again. It wasn't security. It was a man in a crisp, dark suit, his tie slightly askew as if he had run all the way from the terminal. His name tag read, Kenji Tanaka, head of airport operations. His eyes, wide with panic, scanned the first-class cabin for a frantic second before they landed on me. The relief that washed over his face was immediate and profound. He hurried over, bowing deeply. He completely ignored the woman in 1A and the simmering mutiny in the cabin. All his focus was on me. Mr. Vance, he said, his voice breathless. I came as soon as I heard. Please accept my deepest apologies for this unacceptable situation. We had no idea. Is there anything at all I can do? Your private hangar is being prepared. We can have your jet ready for departure in under an hour. The silence in the cabin was now absolute. It was a thick, heavy silence, punctuated only by the hum of the auxiliary power unit. Every eye was on me and the bowing executive. The woman in my seat had gone rigid, her face as white as her pantsuit. Her brain was furiously trying to connect the dots, the name Vance, the title Mr., the offer of a private jet. I could practically see the gears grinding to a halt as the terrible, impossible truth dawned on her. Vance. as in Vansair. The name plastered on the side of the very plane she was sitting on. I gave Kenji a slight nod. Thank you, Kenji. That won't be necessary just yet. First we need to handle this. I gestured calmly towards the woman. This passenger has refused to move from my assigned seat. Kenji looked at her for the first time, and it was as if he was seeing a ghost who had just desecrated a shrine. His professional composure cracked, replaced by a look of pure horror. "Ma'am," he began, his voice tight with controlled fury. "You need to vacate that seat immediately." The woman finally found her voice, though it was small and broken. I'm sorry, I didn't realize." "No," I said, my voice cutting through her apology like glass. "You didn't realize who I was. But you did realize I was a black man, and you decided that meant I was beneath you. You decided your comfort was more important than my ticket, my rights. You weren't just rude, you were a racist, and my airline has a zero-tolerance policy for that." Tears began to well in her eyes. "Please," she whispered. It was a misunderstanding. I turned to Kenji, my expression unreadable. "Kenji, please see to it that all other passengers on this flight are taken care of. Book them into the finest hotels. Rebook them on the first available flights tomorrow, with upgrades. Transfer them to our partner airlines if it's faster. Cover all their meals and expenses. Send a personal letter of apology from me to each of them for the inconvenience. Their loyalty is important to me." Kenji nodded vigorously, already pulling out his phone to issue the orders. Then I looked back at the woman. Her face was a mess of tears and smeared mascara. The Chanel sunglasses on her head seemed like a cruel joke. "As for this passenger," I said, my voice dropping to a near whisper, though everyone in the silent cabin heard it clearly. "I want you to personally escort her off my plane. I want you to add her to the permanent, system-wide no-fly list, and I want you to make sure every partner airline in our network receives a full report on this incident, flagging her as a high-risk passenger." I let that sink in. Her world was collapsing in real time. She opened her mouth to plead, to beg, but I held up a single finger to silence her. I leaned in just close enough for her to see the cold resolve in my eyes. "You wanted seat 1A so badly," I said softly. "Congratulations. You can have it. The police will be here shortly to take your statement. You're not going anywhere tonight." The woman's face crumpled. The last vestiges of her manufactured superiority disintegrated, leaving behind a raw, pathetic desperation. The words "police" and "statement" had finally broken through her shell of entitlement. This wasn't just about being embarrassed or being banned from an airline anymore. This had crossed a line into something far more serious. She was no longer just an inconvenience. She was now an incident. "Police? No, please, you can't," she pleaded, the words tumbling out in a panicked rush. She swiped at her tears, smearing her expensive makeup. "My husband, if he finds out, it was just a mistake, a silly argument over a seat. It stopped being about the seat the moment you decided my skin color made me unworthy of it," I said, my voice as cold and unforgiving as a glacier. I turned away from her, addressing Kenji. "See to it. I'll be in the cockpit with the captain until this is resolved." I walked past her, deliberately avoiding the empty seat 1C that had been hers all along. I didn't give her another glance. As I moved toward the front of the plane, the other first-class passengers parted like the Red Sea, their expressions a mixture of shock, awe, and a healthy dose of fear. The whispers followed me. "Vansair? That's him?" Oh my God, she had no idea. I knocked lightly on the cockpit door. It opened a crack, revealing the captain, a man with silver hair and a deeply worried expression. He saw me and immediately swung the door wide open. "Mr. Vance," he said, his voice strained. "What in the hell is going on? My console lit up with a corporate override. I've never seen anything like it." "It's being handled, Captain," I said, stepping inside and closing the door behind me. The first officer, a much younger man, was staring at me as if he'd seen a deity descend from the heavens. I apologize for the abruptness. I needed to make a point. "A point," the captain said, gesturing out the window at the terminal, where ground crews were already beginning to move away from the plane. "Sir, you just cancelled an international flight with over 300 souls on board. That's more than a point. That's a multi-million-dollar exclamation mark." An expensive lesson, I'll grant you, I replied, looking out at the vast expanse of Narita Airport, but a necessary one. Captain, I started this airline with one simple principle: dignity. Dignity for our customers and dignity for our employees. When I see that principle being violated on my own aircraft, I have to act. What that woman did out there was an attack on the very core of what I've tried to build. The captain was silent for a moment, his brow furrowed in thought. He'd flown for 30 years, and I knew he'd seen his fair share of ugly passenger behavior. I understand, sir, he finally said, his tone softening. But the fallout is my concern, Captain. Your job, and the job of your first officer here, is to fly planes safely. My job is to make sure those planes are worth flying on. I gave them a thin smile. And tonight, I decided this one wasn't. Through the cockpit door, I could hear the commotion as Kenji and his team began the process of deplaning. The woman's voice rose again, this time in a wail of genuine despair, as she was formally asked to gather her belongings and leave the aircraft. It was a pathetic, ugly sound. I spent the next hour in the cockpit, coordinating with David, my COO back in Los Angeles. The financial hit was substantial, but manageable. The logistical nightmare of rebooking 300 passengers was already being expertly handled by my teams on both sides of the Pacific. Every passenger would receive a full refund, a first-class voucher for a future flight, and a personal call from one of our senior executives. We would turn a public relations disaster into a masterclass in customer recovery. All of them, that is, except one. Eventually, Kenji knocked on the door again. "Mr. Vance, she's gone. The airport police took her statement and have escorted her to a private waiting area. They're trying to contact her husband." "Good," I said. "Is the plane clear?" "Yes, sir. All passengers have deplaned and are being taken to the transit hotels." "Excellent. Then let's get this plane back in the air." The captain and first officer stared at me. "Back in the air?" the captain asked, confused. "But the flight is cancelled. The flight plan's been pulled, the slots given away." "I didn't say we were reinstating Flight 3B7, I clarified, turning to face them. "I said we're getting this plane back in the air. File a new flight plan. Destination, Los Angeles. Passengers, 1. The first officer's jaw dropped. The captain just shook his head slowly, a look of grudging respect in his eyes. He'd never seen anything like this. I was turning a fully loaded Boeing 777 into a private jet, simply because I could. Because I wanted to get home. "And, Captain," I added, my hand on the cockpit door, "notify the ground crew. I want them to change the gate information on every screen in this terminal. The flight to LAX is no longer cancelled. It's just delayed. Very delayed." I stepped back out into the now empty first-class cabin. The silence was absolute. The woman's oversized handbag was gone. Her seat, my seat, 1A, was pristine and waiting. I sank into it, the soft leather a welcome relief after the long day. I poured myself a glass of water from the bottle waiting for me, and looked out the window at the bustling airport. I thought it was over. I thought I had won. That's when my phone buzzed. It was a text from a number I didn't recognize. I opened it. There were only 5 words. "You don't know who I am." I frowned, about to dismiss it as a wrong number. But then a second text came through. It was a picture, a news article from a few years back. The headline was about a ruthless corporate raider, a titan of industry, known for crushing his rivals without mercy. And the picture attached to the article was a man I recognized. It was the man from the screensaver on the woman's phone. Her husband. And I suddenly realized that her threats hadn't been idle boasts. The name at the bottom of the article sent a chill down my spine. Damian Blackwood. I hadn't just banned some entitled wife from my airline. I had just publicly humiliated the wife of one of the most powerful and vindictive men on the planet. A cold knot formed in the pit of my stomach. Damian Blackwood. The name was whispered with a mixture of fear and reverence in the circles I moved in. He wasn't just a billionaire, he was a predator. He didn't build companies, he consumed them, stripping them for parts and leaving financial ruin in his wake. His tactics were legendary for their brutality and precision, and I had just provoked him in the most public and personal way imaginable. My simple act of enforcing a zero-tolerance policy had escalated into a war I hadn't even known I was declaring. I looked at the text again. "You don't know who I am." It wasn't a plea from his wife anymore. It was a threat, a promise. My phone buzzed again. Another text from the same number. Vansair, ticker symbol VA, trading at 67.42s. Enjoy it while it lasts. The sheer arrogance was breathtaking. He was telling me flat out that he was coming for my company, for everything I had built. The flight home, which was supposed to be a quiet, triumphant journey, suddenly felt like a 12-hour countdown to my own execution. The silence of the empty 757 was no longer peaceful. It was oppressive, amplifying the frantic thoughts racing through my mind. I had won the battle with his wife, but in doing so, I might have just lost the entire war. For the next 12 hours, I didn't sleep. I sat in seat 1A, the source of the entire conflict, and turned it into my command center. With the plane's satellite Wi-Fi, I convened an emergency virtual board meeting. I called my CFO, my head of legal, and my PR team. I laid it all out, the incident, the woman, and most importantly, her husband. There was no panic, only a grim, focused energy. We were under attack. "He'll start with a short sell," my CFO Maria said, her voice crackling over the connection from New York. "He'll leverage his network to flood the market with negative press, drive the stock down, and then try to trigger a hostile takeover when we're vulnerable. Then we fight back," I stated, my voice steady. "Maria, I want you to authorize a massive stock buyback program, effective at market open. Every dollar we have in reserve. We show strength. We show confidence." I turned my attention to my legal head. "Alan, I want you to draft a full report on the incident. Get sworn affidavits from the crew, from Kenji, from the airport police in Tokyo. We document everything. This wasn't a corporate dispute. It was the enforcement of a federally mandated anti-discrimination policy. We frame this not as a weakness, but as a moral and legal strength." By the time we touched down at LAX, the plan was in motion. The sun was just beginning to rise, painting the sky in hues of orange and purple. As I stepped off my personal 737 onto the tarmac, my phone was already exploding with news alerts. Just as Maria predicted, the financial news networks were ablaze with stories painting me as an unstable, reckless CEO who canceled a flight and stranded hundreds over a petty argument. Vansair stock plummeted in pre-market trading, down nearly 20%. Blackwood was moving even faster than I had anticipated, but we were ready. Our PR team released our counter-narrative. We didn't hide from the incident. We owned it. We released a statement from me, complete with a sanitized summary of the airport police report, detailing the passengers' racist tirade and refusal to comply with crew instructions. We framed the flight cancellation not as an act of ego, but as an unprecedented stand for dignity and respect in the travel industry. We highlighted the extraordinary lengths we went to for the other 300-plus passengers, turning a story of one person's bad behavior into a story of our commitment to everyone else. The narrative began to shift. Social media, initially hostile, started to rally behind us. Hashtags like "Carbubush fly with dignity" and "Knows Vansair stands up" started trending. Passengers from the cancelled flight began posting about the 5-star hotels and first-class rebookings, praising the airline's response. The real battle, however, was on the stock market. When the opening bell rang, it was a bloodbath. Blackwood sharks were selling, driving the price down. But our buyback program kicked in like a tidal wave, absorbing the sell orders and creating a floor. For hours it was a brutal tug of war. The stock price hovered, teetering on a knife's edge. The turning point came around noon. An internal memo from one of Blackwood's own hedge funds was leaked to the press. In it, an analyst warned against the short sell, stating, "Vance is not a traditional CEO. He's a founder with a deep moral connection to his company. Attacking Vansair on ethical grounds is a losing proposition. He will burn the entire company to the ground before he lets a bully win." That leak was no accident. It was a missile I had launched myself, using a contact I had cultivated for years, waiting for the right moment. It changed the story from erratic CEO to principled founder under attack. The market loves a fighter. By the end of the day, the stock had not only recovered but had closed 2% higher than the previous day. Blackwood had thrown his best punch, and we were still standing. He had lost hundreds of millions on his short position. That evening, exhausted but wired, I sat in my office overlooking the runways at LAX. My phone buzzed. It was another text from the unknown number. This time, it was just 2 words. Well played. A minute later, a call came through from the same number. I answered it. Vance. A voice like gravel and cigar smoke grumbled on the other end. It was Damien Blackwood. Blackwood, I replied, my voice calm. There was a long pause. I could hear him take a long drag from a cigar. My wife is an embarrassment, he finally said. It wasn't an apology, just a statement of fact. You cost me a great deal of money today. You cost yourself the money when you bet against human decency, I said. He actually chuckled, a dry, humorless sound. Decency. A novel business strategy. You have my attention, Vance. You're a fighter. I can respect that. I'm just a man who wants to get to his seat, I said. There was another long pause. Tell your board I'm prepared to offer 50% above market value for a 10% stake in Vance Air, he said. Not as a raider, as an investor. Your move today, it showed me something. I leaned back in my chair, a slow smile spreading across my face. I hadn't just survived. I hadn't just won. I had turned my greatest adversary into my biggest investor. Send the offer to my legal team, I said. We'll consider it. I hung up the phone. I looked out at the planes taking off, one after another, soaring into the night sky. I had faced down a racist passenger and a corporate titan, all in the span of 48 hours. And I had won, not by being ruthless, but by being resolute in my principles. It turns out, dignity wasn't just good morals, it was great business. And from now on, everyone who flew on my airline would know it.